trust me, and I should talk to you and do town halls and hear from you, so really happy to be here. I want to thank, I understand we have some members of the Burien City Council who are here, so thank you all so much for being here. And before I get started, I always like to do this. Who's coming to a town hall for the first time? Yes! Oh my gosh, look at this. Give me a round of applause. It's fabulous. Thank you so much for being here, and I really think this is one of the most exciting parts of democracy is our engagement and listening to each other and hearing all the questions that are going to come up. We have a lot to go into tonight, and I know you have a lot of questions, and I want to get to those, so I'll just do some quick remarks, and then we'll go to question and answer. Look, this is a really tough time. When we asked you what issues you wanted to talk about, the very first thing that was on everybody's mind is our Constitution. And not optional, exactly, not optional. And, we have been fighting back against an administration who literally thinks that it is optional and who has been ignoring Article 1 powers of Congress. Congress has the authority to appropriate money. That is our job. It's actually Article 1, so sometimes people say equal branches of government. Actually, we're in Article 1. So we have very special powers, and it is only us that can actually authorize and appropriate funds. And a lot of what has been happening is the administration has been stripping away funds that were already appropriated and authorized from projects. And that has had enormous consequences across the country. They've been eliminating departments, essentially, like the Department of Education, which was established by Congress. It cannot be eliminated by an executive. That is executive overreach, and it is unconstitutional. And a lot of these cases are in the courts, and actually we're winning in a lot of the cases. I think over 87 cases where the Trump administration has had its executive orders blocked, either temporarily or permanently. And so that is important to remember, but it has also been absolutely excruciating to see people being fired, Social Security offices being closed, as our regional office was closed in Seattle, you might know, Head Start being eliminated, the kidnapping and the disappearing of immigrants of all legal statuses. This is not just about the worst of the worst criminals, as was said during the campaign. This has really been about people who have student visas, people who have legal status, legal permanent residence, as well as even U.S. citizen children, including one who was in the middle of cancer treatments, who was deported. And I think the thing that we, just have to remember is that any of these things can happen if due process no longer matters. If the Constitution no longer matters, it can happen to one group of vulnerable people right now, but you know darn well it can happen to any one of us. If free speech for one group of people is taken away, it means free speech for anyone can be taken away. And that is why we have to fight so hard against this. Just this past week, you might have seen that the Republicans passed their big, beautiful betrayal of the working class and poor people across this country. This bill, which is their so-called budget reconciliation bill, literally is the largest transfer of wealth from poor people and working people across this country to the wealthiest millionaires and billionaires. And that's not just me saying it, that's a Congressional Budget Office, that is independent analyses from across the country, and you can actually look at the list of things. It's too long for me to go into all of them right now, but I did want to point out a couple of things. Number one, this bill cuts 14 million Americans off of health care. 14 million Americans off of health care. And this is at a time when already 80 million Americans in this country are either uninsured or underinsured. In other words, they have insurance, but it doesn't cover healthcare costs, which is exactly why we have 100 million Americans who have medical debt totaling $220 billion. Just imagine that, $220 $220 billion of medical debt in the United States of America, the richest country in the world. In other countries, you may get sick, you may even get cancer, but you're not pushed into bankruptcy. 2/3 of the bankruptcies in America are because of medical debt. So this is a context for which stripping away 14 million healthcare from 14 million Americans, that's both through the largest cut to Medicaid. It was at least $625 billion, but you see, we didn't get any estimates for the bill before we voted on it. There was a partial estimate on the previous bill, but then there were all those negotiations that happened, and members of Congress voted on that bill, voted for that bill, Republicans. Every Democrat voted against that bill, by the way. And every Republican except two, and then two apparently slept through it, but two voted against it and called out the impact on the deficit, because it actually leads to at least a $4 trillion increase in the national debt. Now, I personally am somebody who believes if you're investing and that is going to bring you returns, then that's worth it. If you're investing in universal child care and health care, in the things that people need, then that's one thing. But this is all money that's going to the wealthiest 1%. If you are in the 0.1 of 1%, the wealthiest 0.1 of 1%, anyone in that category? And here, well, if you were, you would get a $398,000 tax break. If you are in the bottom 20% of Americans in this country, you get $90. If you're in the next 20%, you get about $800. And exactly right, ma'am, you lose your health care. So when they say, oh no, we're giving tax breaks to everybody in this bill, first of all, remember that the tax breaks for the working class that are in here, very slim, they're crumbs. They expire versus the tax breaks to the wealthiest are permanent. And then on top of that, you're paying more for your health care. If you happen to be on Medicaid, 60% of stays, long-term stays in this country, are paid for through Medicaid. And by the way, if you're on AppleCare, that is Medicaid. People here get confused because I've heard some people say, no, we're protected because we have AppleCare. Well, AppleCare is 60% funded by Medicaid. So this is something that is huge. The healthcare pieces of this are huge. Now, in addition, it cuts the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. We call it SNAP, but it's nutrition assistance, by $330 billion. This is a third of all nutritional assistance. And for people who have been on SNAP or dealt with SNAP, nutritional assistance in this country averages out to about $2 per meal for people who are hungry. $2 per meal. And then you think about those billionaires who are getting $398,000. By the way, if you're a millionaire, then you get about $89,000 in tax breaks. So you just have to look at this and say, what is the value here that's being put forward? It's saying that regular people don't matter, but the millionaires and billionaires do. Now, on top of that, it sets up a $500 billion cut to Medicare. So when they say, we've got somebody who has followed this bill, thank you so much. When they say that we're not cutting Medicaid, we're not cutting Medicare, they're wrong, they're lying. It is not true. They are cutting it, and it's in the CBO analysis. So you can go, now they're trying to get rid of all the independent analysis, they're attacking the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office, which does a lot of the bipartisan independent analysis for us. They're attacking the GAO now. But it absolutely does set up a $500 billion cut to Medicare. It slashes funding for Planned Parenthood. Now remember that Planned Parenthood provides things like cancer screening, reproductive care. So basic reproductive care is being slashed. Gender-affirming care, at the last minute, they had already banned Medicaid from covering gender-affirming care for kids, but then they added that it can't cover any gender-affirming care for anyone, including adults. So they're getting in your private business between your doctor and you about the care you need. Hang on one second, we'll get to questions, I promise. It includes a $330 billion cut to all of the student loan repayment program that we have put in place to allow higher education to be more affordable. It has a $330 billion cut to that. And then it also has a whole bunch of terrible policy provisions. It's supposed to be a budget bill, but it has a lot of policy provisions, like our state insurance commissioner came to visit me and said that the AI provision that essentially bans states from regulating AI in our own states. And you know that AI is being used, it has plenty of good uses, but it's also got plenty of bad uses, and it needs to be regulated because it's being used to drive up rental prices. It's being used to drive up all kinds of other costs for Americans. It prevents federal judges from holding anybody, holding elected officials in contempt of court. This is a Donald Trump provision. They don't want it to be held in contempt of court. So you and I have to be held in contempt of court, but not him. It also reverses something called the Flores decision, which was essentially a decision that said you can't indefinitely detain immigrant kids. And this reverses that and says indefinite detention for kids is fine. And all of this is to give a $5 trillion tax break to the wealthiest. So it is a clear choice from our Republican colleagues to keep people off of food assistance, health care, all of these other things in order to finance more yachts for the super wealthy. I mentioned how you would do if you're, depending on which tax bracket you're in. And I mentioned that it increases the debt by $4 trillion. Now, they were so proud of this bill that they debated it in the middle of the night. We had an all-night session. When I was in college, we used to call it all-nighters. We had an all-nighter, and actually some committees had multiple days of all-nighters because they literally started the Rules Committee debate at 1 in the morning. And our floor debate ended at about 7 in the morning. We went for 18 hours. So if you're so proud of a bill, why do you debate it in the middle of the night and try to get these cuts through the American people and try to somehow say that you're doing good for this country? It was absolutely shameful. I mentioned it passed by just one vote. Democrats all stuck together. The other thing that is a glimmer of hope here is we still have time to really fix this bill. Well, I don't know if we can totally fix it, but we certainly have the time to make it better. The Senate still has to have its debate. They do have some problems with this. But I'll just say that all these people, including my House colleagues, I had an amendment in the Budget Committee to say we will not cut Medicaid, because they kept saying we're not going to cut Medicaid, we're not going to cut Medicaid. I said, great, vote for my amendment. It says no cuts to Medicaid. Not a single one of them did. And so we just have to remember that they say a bunch of things, but I think when they start telling you that your taxes are going to go up, or you start hearing that from other people because Democrats don't want to extend the tax cuts, ask them how much of the tax package goes to a regular working person. Ask them how much you're going to get your health care cut because of their so-called attack on waste, fraud, and abuse. Everybody that is in Medicaid that can work is already working. That's what all of the research says. So if you put in these bureaucratic work requirements, all it does is prevent people from getting the health care that they desperately need. And so this has been a real challenge. And look, I know that this has just been a tough time for everyone. Costs are going up. Housing is astronomical. The cost of housing is astronomical here in Seattle, but really across the country. There's not a single place that you can afford the rent if you're just a regular working family on a minimum wage. You can't afford the rent. And Seattle is one of the highest rental markets in the country, highest housing prices. The average home now in the Seattle area is $900,000. And so it makes it impossible for people to even think about having a home, owning a home, even if they're working a good job full-time. They can't think about that. And then you add to that the rent is too damn high everywhere in the country. And so one of the huge things has been that hedge funds and private equity funds have been buying up single-family homes, apartment buildings, and driving the prices up. And then those AI models I mentioned, in fact, the last FTC under Joe Biden, under Dina Khan, sued RealPage for using AI models that drive up the prices of rent and make it unaffordable for people to actually be able to afford anything. On top of that, a lot of people don't know that Canada accounts for 84% of the softwood lumber that comes into the country. And so the tariff, the crazy, indiscriminate tariff war that the president has started with Canada is going to drive up housing prices because the cost of these materials is going to go way up as a result. I want to be really clear about what I believe. I do not believe that homelessness is a failure of individuals. It is a failure of systems. It is a failure of the system to provide sufficient affordable housing. And I think that it is a structural failure of our country, the richest country in the world, to be able to house people. And so I have consistently said that what we need is investments in housing, we need support services, we need housing that accommodates the many needs of our population, and we have to invest in it. That's why in Build Back Better, when I was the chair of the Progressive Caucus, I held the line over and over again, because I wanted to see the largest investment ever in housing infrastructure. And we got it passed in the House. And then we had two so-called Democrats at the time who blocked it in the Senate. They're both gone now. But I think that this has been a huge issue for me, and it's why I introduced the Housing as a Human Right Bill, which really is about how do we invest in the affordability of housing, how do we increase the number of vouchers, how do we invest in greening and improving the existing public housing stock. There's a lot of things we need to do, but it is a failure of the system to provide housing. And so anything that is about criminalization of housing, I'm against. I just don't think, criminalization of homelessness, I'm against. Because I don't think that homelessness should be criminalized. There are other solutions for that. And we have to get to the root causes. Now, we're told all the time when it comes to housing, to healthcare, to anything that we care about, have you heard, we don't have the money for that. We can't afford that, right? But at the same time, in this bill that we just passed, that Republicans just passed, they increased defense spending to over $1 trillion. $1 trillion for the only agency that has never passed a federal audit. Not just never passed, it's failed its audit 7 times. 7 times. And the majority of that money goes to private for-profit defense contractors. So don't tell me that we don't have money. We have never suffered from scarcity in the United States of America. We suffer from greed. And we just have to be willing to address that. I was looking at the latest wealth statistics in this country. Again, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the wealthiest 10% of Americans hold 69% of the wealth in this country. And the bottom 50% of families, that's more than 150 million people, hold 3%. 3% of the wealth. So this is really important. And please don't buy the idea that they're cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, because as I mentioned, you could always go to the Department of Defense to cut out the waste, fraud, and abuse there. You could go to the Medicare Disadvantage program. That's what I call Medicare Advantage. It's a privatization of traditional Medicare. And you could look at the waste, fraud, and abuse there. That's why I signed an amicus brief. I led an amicus brief to actually hold United Healthcare accountable, because these private insurance companies are ripping us off of over $1.2 trillion of overpayments that could be going into your dental, vision, and hearing. It could be going into expanding Medicare so you don't have to pay all those co-pays, those deductibles, have an out-of-pocket cap, things like that. But they're not taking money from that. They're literally taking a chainsaw to the departments that we care about. And so we have just been trying as an office to make sure that we answer as many questions as we can, help as many people as we can. We've already responded to and closed, helped 72 people who have reached out to our office about your Social Security payments. So just know that we have an amazing staff, many of whom are here tonight. Give it up for my staff. If you want. I also just want to thank, I don't know if we have civil servants in the room who work for our federal agencies. Thank you so much for the work that you are doing. And cruelty and the chaos are not a bug, they are the feature. That is the point here. So our work is just to fight back, to not be complicit, to demand justice. Whether it's with Kilmar Abrego Garcia, where we had a 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision that the administration had to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia from El Salvador, where they shipped him off, despite the fact that he was here illegally, despite the fact that he had a valid claim to stay in the United States so he would not be tortured in El Salvador. They shipped him off, and then they said, no, I don't have the power to bring him back, except the president said the quiet part aloud and said on national television that he could bring him back anytime he wants. But they're not, despite the Supreme Court saying he has to bring them back. And so, at the end of the day, I will use every power that I have as your representative in hearings. Maybe some of you saw me questioning Marco Rubio the other day. I said, you are snatching and disappearing people just because they wrote an op-ed that you didn't agree with. He said, I don't do the snatching. So he clearly admitted that they're snatching. And so, you know, I will use every platform I have to do everything I can to fight back. We are in Congress also continuing to file our amicus briefs. Some of the things that we have been successful in the courts around has been blocking DOJ from access. By the way, DOJ, I call it the Department of Greed and Ego. This is a completely ludicrous department that is going after all kinds of our government agencies and federal servants. But we were successful in blocking DOJ from accessing sensitive data from Social Security. We have been successful at stopping the Trump administration from shutting down the Department of Education and courts, capping funding for critical research at the NIH, and stopping refugee resettlement in this country, fighting back against these things. Now, whether he will listen to the courts or not is still to be seen. But what is also clear is that when you have somebody, because I have so many of you who write to me or call me or see me in the streets and say, how is this possible? How is this possible? And what I would say to you is, I've been thinking a lot about this. I sit on the Judiciary Committee. We got complacent, I think, as a country, in thinking that those checks and balances were hard and fast, and that they would protect us against the worst abuses. But the thing is, the framers were really smart, but not all-knowing. And they assumed, or they hoped, that what would happen, and this has been mainly true for our history, that there would be people on both sides who would put the Constitution first, who would say that regardless of who I vote for, regardless of whether I'm a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, I believe in the Constitution of the United States. And I will do everything in my power to uphold the Constitution. That's the oath that we take when we're sworn into office. And that is not the case. Number one, these Republicans in Congress have been completely giving over their authority. And I talk to some of them, and I say, do you realize you're giving away all your authority? They're like, well, you know. And then on top of that, you have an executive who isn't going to listen to Congress, who isn't going to listen to the courts. And so what happens to those checks and balances? They don't work. And then what? Then the answer is you. And I'm not trying to shed responsibility. I'm going to do everything I can. But what I am telling you is that all of the research on democratic backsliding that has happened in countries around the world, and all of the research that's showing this is one of the most aggressive seizures of power in any democracy in the world, the most successful, only successful tactic is the power of civil resistance. And so this is a huge area that we have been educating people on the other side. Has anyone in the room done resistance lab trainings? Awesome, thank you so much. We will have our next resistance lab on June 1st, so you can go to my campaign website to sign up for that. But the whole idea is that we have to help people to understand how to fight back against an authoritarian, against somebody who is literally moving us towards fascism as we speak. And I don't say that lightly, but I do think that if we don't recognize that it's on all of us to hold our democracy in our hands and actually protect it, preserve it, then we won't be able to do it. We need you to do it. And so I want to be a partner with you in that. I promise I will continue to fight hard. You'll never see me sitting back on the things that need to be said, but we do have work to do to make sure that everyone is joining in the struggle. And we will win back the House in 2 years. That I am confident. There's the Senate and the White House. And so we don't win back our country. We just get a temporary reprieve of sorts, but there's still going to be terrible things we have to fight, and we have to win back our country. We have to actually be able to have whoever is sitting in the White House, of whatever party. Obviously, I'd like it to be a Democratic president. But whatever party it is, you should be able to stand up for the Constitution of the United States of America. And that's what I believe all of us are here for, and so I'm looking forward to your questions. And thank you all so much for being here. So here's how we do questions. You see we've got these great folks who are waving here for my staff. They have microphones, and you can line up. Are they lined up on the stage? Okay. You can line up on both sides of the stage, and they will be so kind as to hold the mic for you. Because what we have learned after doing 125 town halls is you get 2 minutes to ask your question or give your comment.
1 minute.
1 minute. 1 minute to give your question or comment, and then they will gently take the mic away from you. Not so gently if you try to hold on to it. So, but please line up, and we will get to as many questions as we can. Thank you all so much for being here again. Let's go over here, Santos first.
I'm Teresa Fleer. I am a scientist. I was a professor of global sustainability and geography. And I might add that I'm living in a bottom house trying to live on $900 a month. Thank you, ageism. I have 4 questions. Thank you for answering the one about the Constitution. However, I am concerned about thuggery, because that's how Mugabe managed to stay in Zimbabwe. And as you are well aware, we have a sheriff's association in this country, many of whom have members in our state who do not seem to feel that they have to enforce that. So I am concerned about that. I am a resource manager. I am terrified that we are going to lose our public lands. That is the only difference between us and the rest of the world. Our ancestors came to this country because the rest of the world is owned by aristocrats, corporations, and the church. Lastly, the Venezuelans, I have friends, I was a translator. I can't find my friends, they have disappeared.
Thank you so much. Let me get to all 3 of those quickly. So on thuggery, I couldn't agree with you more. We have the most corrupt administration. I mean, right now he is violating the Emoluments Clause with this accepting of the $400 million jet from Qatar. This is so clearly, and the thing is, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, apparently wrote a legal memo saying, no, it's just fine. Today, I was reading an article about Tom Homan, who is the head of ICE, who used to be a contractor for GEO, which runs our Northwest Detention Center. And the amount of money that is being funneled into the mass deportation system means that they make a buck, actually a lot of bucks, just by detaining wrongfully people that shouldn't be detained. So if you're detained, even if you're detained for a day or a week or a month, they make money on that because they have literally given out these contracts to benefit, and then the crypto, anyway, I can go on and on. They are stealing from the American people. On public lands, and that, by the way, is one of the defining factors of corrupt authoritarian governments. On public lands, we have been working really hard on this. You are absolutely right. Look, we are the democracy we are because of the public good, about the common goods that we have. The lands are critical for all of us, and we did manage to get one provision taken out of the bill, the beautiful betrayal bill, that was around more elimination of public lands. But this is a huge issue. And then Venezuela, yes, we have been, as the top Democrat on the immigration subcommittee, and this is an issue I've worked on for a long time, it is horrifying to see what's happening to the Venezuelans who are being deported en masse and no due process. And multiple courts have said you cannot deport people to third countries. They're sending people, they would send them to Libya, then they sent them to South Sudan, where there's a war going on, or they attempted to send them to Libya, there's attempted to send them to South Sudan, and then they say they can't get them back once they're gone. So this is just a massive, three very massive issues, and they're all part of this unconstitutional, unlawful government that we have to fight back. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Congresswoman. My name is Jennifer Pichamba, and I work in public education. For the majority of my career, I worked in a Title I school. A lot of the issues that are facing our country face our young people and our families across the board, from healthcare to immigration, pretty much you name it, it affects our families. Recently, one of my students, his family is here on an H-1 visa, and he's been in this country with his family since he was in kindergarten. So he has been in our system K through 12. He had hopes of going to University of Washington, Huskies. However, now his family is concerned because Microsoft, where his dad works, has worked for more than 18 years. He's potentially going to be cut, and they will lose their H-1 visa. I don't know if I have a question so much as I'm really, really concerned about public education and the effects that this administration has on all of my families, including my own family. My son is graduating from Western on June 14th, and he's going to have student loans. So all of it is concerning.
Well, first of all, let's give it up for the public educators. Can't tell you how much we appreciate you. On immigration, this administration has made it really clear they want to shut down all legal pathways. It isn't just about going after the worst of the worst, as they said during the campaign. It is about shutting down legal immigration. That's what I have said for some time, and it is coming to fruition right now. And so they literally are terminating visas, legal pathways that we have, which are already insufficient. If we want to fix the immigration system, which we desperately need to do, we need to add legal pathways so that there are actually legal ways. Our immigration system has not been reformed in over 30 years. 30 years. So we have different needs today as a country than we did 30 years ago. And we don't have a way for people to be able to stay. So you can certainly reach out to our office, or if he's a constituent, reach out to our office. We can see if there's anything we can do. But it is very difficult because they have shut down all these legal pathways. Just today they said they were halting all student visa applications because they're contemplating a policy where they screen social media of people. And if it's not going to be for criminal activity, it's going to be for whether or not you agree with Donald Trump. Because that's what they're doing right now. And I think I might be the only member of Congress that came here on a student visa. I came here when I was 16 years old by myself on a student visa. And I think I might be one of the only or the only member of Congress that's been on an H-1B visa, because that's how I got to stay in the country. So I hear you, and we will do everything we can to help your families, and feel free to reach out to us on those individual cases. Thank you so much.
I appreciate what you're doing. I hope you're open to constructive criticism.
Yeah,
and I want Democrats to win. Medical debt. People talk about it. I appreciate what you said about it. Proposal, zero. I've heard no proposals. Biden trying to get rid of student debt. Getting rid of medical debt is not so difficult. All the bills come with CPT and DRG codes. You say we're going to adjust them to the Medicare rates, which are a lot lower than what people pay. And then you say, we're going to pay 20 or 30 cents on the dollar because it's debt, and you sell bonds to pay it. But there's nothing coming for you folks. Second, Medicare for all. You're a co-sponsor. It's terrible for two reasons. One, the name Medicare, as you said, is Medicare Advantage. It's a ripoff. It's terrible. It's a bad name. Second, some people like their current arrangements, and it's not fair to, we don't do that in America. They're allowed to go to parochial school and so on.
Thank you so much. Always open to constructive criticism. On the first thing, which is around medical debt, I actually am a co-sponsor of a bill that cancels all medical debt, and there are lots of creative ways to do it, as you said, by buying it on the dollar. It's cheap, and there are places where states have even invested in buying some of this and relieving people of medical debt. So I think we absolutely need to do more on this, and I talk about it because of that reason. Now, Medicare for all, those are fighting words, because I am not just a co-sponsor, I am the lead sponsor. Look, I think that Medicare is a very popular program. People want improved Medicare. Seniors who are on Medicare want dental and vision and hearing covered. They want their payment rates to go up. There are improvements that need to be made, and in the Medicare for All Act, we make those improvements. We make it comprehensive care. We make sure that you get care when you need it, where you need it, from birth to death. And here's the thing about the people who are getting health care in this country. Right now, the people that are getting health care are probably getting it, if they're getting it either through their employer, and in many cases, that employment health care is incredibly expensive, and if you lose your job, you lose your health care. So in my mind, it is not a sustainable solution. What happened during COVID? 27 million people lost their jobs and then lost their health care on top of it. Nowhere in the world in other OECD countries is that the case. You have your health care, whether you lose your job or not. And so I do think we as a country have to get over the idea that maybe some people have health care that they don't want to give up, and move to a system where everyone has health care. When you need it, where you need it. So it's just a difference of opinion, but I respect your opinion, and I can tell you Medicare for All, 70% of the American population believes that we should have a system like Medicare for All. I don't really care what we call it. I just want it to be universal health care, and we already have a system that provides excellent care at really reasonable prices for the majority of seniors. We can expand it and improve it.
First, thank you coming dressed as if you're part of the audience, rather than wearing blue, red, and American flag purple, which seems to have the magical powers to convince us not to listen to what we're being told and just to believe whatever fantasies you want us to fall into. So thank you for having that respect for us. Question about politics rather than policy. In Arizona, a bullet was dodged. Kelly won the election and replaced him. In West Virginia, the Democrats gave up a vote that was 80% reliable and got a vote that's 0% reliable. As much as I was not a huge fan of Manchin, I'd still rather have 80% than 0%. In your early remarks, you made it clear you were glad to see him gone. I'd like to understand the political thinking that says this was a good trade, because the difference between a 2-vote majority and a 3-vote majority in the Senate is pretty daunting.
No, very fair question. I never came out against Senator Manchin, and actually he and I had a pretty good relationship because of all of our, well, I just happened to say that they were gone now, after they opposed child care. Listen, if we had passed Build Back Better, which was the bill that he and Kristen Sinema fought back against, I think we would have won the election because we would have had universal child care, we would have had housing investments that would have helped people to feel the difference in their lives. And I think they did us a great disservice. Now, that said, I think that the fact of the two-party system that we have in this country, we can get into this if you want, is that somebody like Joe Manchin is in the same party as somebody like me. And the people that I represent, thank you very much, you re-elect me because you want me to fight for the things that we are talking about tonight. And we cannot, as a Democratic Party, keep tacking to the center as Republican lights. That is going to lose us the election. I mean, who prefers the light version of something to the real version, right? Like maybe you drink Coke Light, but it's probably because you have to for medical reasons. Most people would pick the real Coke. And I think that we have to recognize that we didn't just lose this election. We have lost working people over a couple of decades, going back to pushing for fair trade for free trade instead of fair trade. Going back to pushing jobs outside of the United States instead of building facilities here and making sure that these were all good union jobs, continuing manufacturing in the United States. These are really big issues that said to working people, we don't respect the value of your work. My husband is a bricklayer. He was trained as a bricklayer. He came up through the apprenticeship program. I believe our unions are absolutely essential to democracy in this country. And so when we get into power and then we don't raise the minimum wage, we don't increase the collective bargaining power of unions, we don't do the things that we said we were going to do, like actually expand voting rights and make sure we get money out of politics. And we say that the reason we're not doing that is because of some bureaucratic thing called the filibuster. They are getting rid of all the rules to do things for wealthy people. We should reset the system, be bold in our values of what we stand for, and actually fight for working people and poor people across this country.
Retired federal employee. Environment, the climate catastrophe is my big issue. The climate catastrophe is my big issue. Nature waits for no one. However, what I want to bring up with you is that I believe the Democrats, the Democratic leadership of the United States, is largely responsible for the mess we're in now, by ignoring grassroots and paying attention to the high rollers, the big money. I included APAC and the Israel pro-Israeli lobby supports genocide. So what I hope I'm hearing someday is that the Democratic Party is going to start paying attention to the grassroots, help them figure out how to vote in a climate that voter suppression reigns supreme. Get involved with the grassroots.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think you know where I stand on this. And, you know, when I ran for Congress in 2016, I was one of only 4 members of Congress that refused to take any corporate PAC money. I have never taken corporate PAC money. Because I just think it is outrageous the amount of money elections, and the way in which, and this sort of goes back to the last question about, you know, we can't like say on the one hand that we stand up for working people and poor people as Democrats, but on the other hand, we have our hand out to all the big corporations and the wealthiest billionaires and billionaires asking for money to fund our elections, to fund our campaigns. I just don't, I think people can smell a rat, and there's a rat there. So I think we have to get money out of politics because it does influence our decisions. Now, one tiny good nugget piece, would you like to hear a good nugget piece? We are working on a bipartisan stock trading ban bill. That has the most interesting cast of characters. All of us had bipartisan bills in the last Congress, and now we've all come together as a group to combine our bills and come up with one bill. So I had a bill with a Republican who's now no longer in Congress, unfortunately. Alexandra, so it's me, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, Seth Magaziner, and Chip Roy on the other side, Brian Fitzpatrick. It's an interesting cast of characters. And we disagree on a whole bunch of other things, but we agree on this. Members of Congress should not be able to trade stocks. Sell those stocks that you have, because how do you make a decision about the tech sector or any sector if you stand to gain in your personal pocket from whatever decision you're going to make? So we have we're working on a bill. We just got Speaker Johnson to say he supports it. We have fucking Jeffrey saying he supports it. So our hope is that we can actually get this thing passed. And I think that would be take a big step forward in saying, members of Congress, yeah, we have to make some sacrifices, and one of them is if you happen to own stock, you should invest it in diversified mutual fund, publicly traded mutual funds. It should not be in individual stocks that you can then game the system for, and it happens on both sides, I hate to say it.
Hi, my name is Mary. I'm wondering if the big bogus billionaire bill includes anything that impacts elections. And if it doesn't, what are your thoughts about protecting our right to have?
Yeah, in this bill, so technically a budget bill in the Senate cannot have any policy provisions. But obviously they can go after states, and you can imagine if states are spending more and more money on healthcare or other things, if they're reducing essentially the budgets of state government, that there will be a consequence to election integrity. And we know that that's an area that they're already attacking. So there are other bills that attack election integrity and voting rights, not directly so in this budget bill that just got passed, but we voted on plenty of other things on the floor that absolutely do that and take away already suppressed voting rights for people, suppress them even more. So we know that that's one of their top tactics, and we have to continue to file our lawsuits to challenge all the things that they're doing in states across the country to suppress voting rights. And then we have our own bill, obviously, for the PEOPLE Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that is absolutely crucial to both getting money out of politics and expanding voting rights.
Hi, friends. Thank you, Congresswoman, for inviting us to the town hall in Burien, Washington. So I'm an environmentalist. I'm a tree hugger. I sent in my comments to your website and my couple emails yesterday. And I just wanted to point out a local issue, and I live right near here. The airplanes fly over my house, maybe 200 times a day. When SeaTac Airport was built, there was only 2 runways. It actually is surrounded by 3 towns: SeaTac, Normandy Park, and Burien. And it is the smallest airport of this much traffic in the entire United States. And there are hundreds of acres of parkland that are targeted for construction of warehouses right now. We did add the 3rd runway, and that, along with the news that we just bought Hawaiian Airlines for Alaska, there's going to be a whole bunch more of new traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been a part of the coalition that, my staff has been attending the coalition to address the noise issue here in Burien, and actually Vashon has also been affected by it. So we have a few parts of the district that are part of this, and I've been a co-sponsor of bills to actually address this. We have an appropriations rider in that, would help around some of the mitigation, but it has been an ongoing problem. And the challenge is it's one of the biggest airports in the country. It does have a lot of traffic that comes through, and we don't have the kind of land here that many airports do. If you've been to Portland recently, you see how they built this beautiful new terminal. They have tons of land at the Portland airport. We don't. And so this has been a real challenge, and at the end of the day, we both have to mitigate for the noise and the environmental effects of the communities that are impacted around airports, and we have to figure out where we can put an airport to accommodate the traffic that is coming through our region, because it is really, really important that we do both. And so I'll continue to work on that. Thank you for being a tree hugger. I appreciate it.
Hello?
Hi, Stefan. This is the second town hall meeting, and because I only have 1 minute to speak, I'm going to make it as fast as possible. So, I told you previously that during the election, Joe Biden, if he didn't stop sending weapons to Israel, he was going to lose to Donald Trump. He stepped down. Kamala was the presumptive nominee. She said that she was not going to do anything different from Joe Biden, and she started sending weapons to Israel. That part of that, plus a bunch of other stuff, caused her to lose against the fascist Donald Trump. And so now, Donald Trump is also doing the same thing that the Democrats did, just sending weapons, bombing children, killing people, and I'm off that the Democrats don't seem to care. I want to know what Democrats are going to do to win young people back and earn their vote.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You may know that I've been one of the most vocal opponents to the war on Gaza and the killing of innocent Palestinians in Gaza, also in the West Bank. In fact, I just introduced the joint resolutions of disapproval on the House side that were companions to Bernie Sanders in the Senate to disapprove of the arms sales to Israel. I have filed numerous bills around making sure that we no longer provide look, it's just about obeying our domestic law. Our domestic law says that we can't send military weapons that are going to be used in violation of our domestic laws. And right now, Israel has been violating our domestic laws around humanitarian assistance, around a whole host of things. And so I just sponsored a screening of No Other Land. Has everybody seen the incredible film? I would really recommend that you watch it. It's heartbreaking, but I did a screening of it in Congress because I think members of Congress have to be held account, including Democrats, to the fact that we continue to ship all this money. It's your money, it's taxpayer money to Israel, and it's being used in Gaza to kill innocent Palestinians in Gaza and to deny humanitarian assistance. And I've also been very outspoken against all of the rising anti-Semitism. I don't think these things are in conflict. I think we can say that we should not be subsidizing the killing of innocent Palestinians with our U.S. taxpayer dollars, and we stand in absolute support of our Jewish community members who are here and against anti-Semitism. Jewish constituents are with us on this too. People don't want to see these things being done in their name. And so I will continue to fight against this, and it is, to me, I've never seen this kind of influence of, again, money in politics, in the way special interests in politics as I have in this particular issue. It's remarkable to me and horrifying and heartbreaking, just heartbreaking.
My name's Santana. I'm deeply concerned because Doge has caused a cybersecurity breach, as alleged in a sworn statement to Congress by Daniel Belarus. And the harm of it continues to grow as Doge hides behind the excuse of eliminating information silos. Within minutes of staffers gaining access to the NLRB's database, a large outflow of information was immediately followed by attempted logins from Russia using the recently created credentials, which were valid, of the new Doge accounts. We are in danger, and I fear for what a database of Americans personally identifying information could be used for by adversaries and by an administration who are, in policy, pursuing the social murder of immigrants, the disabled, the trans and queer community, and those who speak out. So I ask now what we can do as a collective and individually to make sure that accountability comes for those who are willfully destroying the rule of law and violating their oath of office. The lack of action against them is an injustice that allows the carnival of corruption and fascism to continue. How do we stop it?
Yeah, thank you so much. Beautifully said. And look, this is where the resistance work has to come in. This is where our resistance lab training is focused, because it is going to take all of us. And everything you said is right on. You know, our private data, and previously I worked very closely in a bipartisan way on FISA reform, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, because I care deeply about civil liberties, and so do a bunch of people on the other side. And we almost got some big reforms through working with people like Jim Jordan. But that time seems to be gone because nobody really seems to care about our private data being utilized now by the Department of Greed and Evil and, you know, stolen from us. And you know it's going to go right into all kinds of hands. And the fact that signal chains are being used for confidential national security purposes, everything that we have around national security and around the privacy of our data is being destroyed. And so what we have to do is continue to fight back. And the challenging thing here is these seem like different issues, but they're actually all connected. They're all about an individual taking control of all aspects of our lives, right? Our personal information, our health decisions, our ability to thrive or even survive. All of this, to me, is very related. Our free speech, our due process, our constitutional protections, our right to education, all of it. And so I think the only way, that's why I say a mass civil resistance movement is really the only way that we are going to be able to legitimately fight against this, a mass civil resistance, nonviolent resistance movement with following the principles of Dr. Martin Luther King, making sure that we are getting trained on these different pieces of effective strategy. That's what it's going to take. And for people who are like, oh my God, I don't do that, it's okay. Most people in countries where democracies have fallen never thought that they were going to have to do it either. But they did, and they won. And the people can win, but it will require all of us.
Thank you for being here tonight. My name's Mike. I'm a retired teacher. And one of the things that I really tried to do with students was to help them feel empowered, that they could do things, they could get things done. What you've shared with us tonight, what I think many of us know, is that the checks and balances system that we have right now is really in trouble. And I guess as a citizen, I'm going to vote for you, I'm going to vote for anything Democrat, but what else can I do? What else can we do to feel empowered to deal? We can't go back to Washington, D.C. You're doing that for us, and we're grateful. But what can we do around our neighborhood, in our community, and in our schools? I've been a tutor in the school that I used to work at, so I know some of that, but can you give us some ideas and some leadership on empowering us?
Yes.
So we can help and change.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for your work in education. teachers who refused to take signs down that were welcoming kids. An amazing story in northern New York, in the town where Tom Homan lives, where immigrant kids were kidnapped and snatched. And the town, which is only 12,000 people, where Tom Homan, the ICE director, lives, 10,000 people turned out in the streets and marched to his house. And they got those kids back. So there is absolutely a way. The Tesla takedowns have been really phenomenal because in the theory of change of how you fight back against authoritarian leaders, you don't necessarily take on the person at the top, but you take on the institutions, the pillars of support that fund and enable that power. And so if you want to know more about this and specific things, I would also just recommend that you sign up for the June 1st Resistance Lab, because this is what we go into, is how do you make a difference? What things are effective? It's virtual, you can do it from your home, it's 2 hours on a Sunday morning. It's really important that we understand what is effective and how do we start to attack those pillars of support, and how do we build the strength that we need in allies, in the spectrum of allies, to be able to move people to a different place. Because I genuinely believe that whether you're a Republican, we may have Republicans in this audience tonight, we do have about 20% of Republicans in this district. I really believe that good Republicans don't want this either. And that we all want a constitution that works, and we may disagree on a whole bunch of things, but we shouldn't be disagreeing on the Constitution. So to sign up there, we can give you more ideas, but I would just say that no thing is too small, and don't wait for someone else. Find the thing in your neighborhood, in your community that you can do. Second thing I would say to you is you're all in a district where you have a member of Congress who hopefully is doing most of what you want. But you must have people that you know in Republican districts and Republican states. Remember that this bill passed by one vote. So make a list of 10 people that you know in some of those districts and call them and ask them to write in. Ask them to call their member of Congress. Explain to them what this means to you. Make a video if you're in social media, if we have young people in this room, if we have older folks in this room who are on social media, make a video about an issue that is important to you and speak up, because we really do need a lot of people to be doing this, to communicate with people and to draw more people into the movement. So those are just a couple of ideas here, but sign up for Resistance Lab will give you a lot more.
Good evening, Congressman. Thank you so much for holding this space for us tonight. My name is Labrana. I just want to preface this by saying I came to this country as a refugee in the 90s from Bosnia, and I gotta say, I'm terrified of what's to come. I've seen fascism firsthand. I think we're already there, so my question comes out of that context. I totally understand that we all have a shared responsibility for civic engagement, for resistance, but I want to know if there are any concrete plans from the Democrats who still wield some power. And I want to know, as you pointed out, Trump still operates with impunity, with total disregard for the courts, including the Supreme Court. And with that in mind, how effective can a purely legal strategy be towards someone who has no regard for the law?